What's the secret to getting to be good at drawing? Okay, well, it's drawing all the time, and it's drawing cool stuff. It's drawing fun stuff, having a good time doing it. That's what this series is about. These are the artist workout series. I started these a while back. I've been doing a lot of them. So there is a playlist, check it out. These are designed, whether you are a beginner or an advanced artist, they're designed to be 15-minute workouts. You're learning the basics of drawing through these 15-minute exercises. The hardest part is just sitting down and doing it. And you might even find with only 15 minutes a day, you can develop some drawing skill, you can advance your skills, and you might even find you want to sit down for even longer. Today we're going to be drawing Monkey D. Luffy from One Piece. Grab your pencils or whatever digital program you like to work in. Let's dive into drawing some Monkey D. Luffy. All right, let's start the timer. Now we all know the basic construction of a head. You start with a circle, you draw a line down the central line of that head. And that just basically gives us a sense of the roundness. Think of it like a basketball. So much of drawing is learning to break down complex shapes into simple shapes in your mind. And so we're thinking of it like a rounded object. So it has contours, and we want to draw this cheek coming down to the chin. If you're struggling with just the understanding of like how a head is constructed, then I highly recommend you check out my easy art lessons or any of my free videos here on YouTube about the construction of a head, how to draw a head or how to draw a face. So we've drawn in our guidelines. Now we just have to reduce the opacity on our sketch layer. If you're just drawing on paper, just make sure that you've been drawing very lightly for your construction lines, as I always say. And then now we know where our eyes are going to sit. We know where our chin is, and we know where the side of the face is going to be. And it's important to remember with Luffy, he just has dots for eyes, almost in every case. I had a hard time finding any reference images of Luffy with anything other than dots for eyes. And then we're going to just draw in a little triangle for the nose. They do this in manga because it's super quick and easy. And then there's usually right about this distance from the eye to the nose, you want to draw that angled eyebrow. And these are just very thin eyebrows. And now you want to kind of imagine that this nose extends straight up into that eyebrow on the far side. And then we're going to give it like a nice angry grimace, because he's intense in this image. If you remember what it looks like in the final image, he is intense. And in fact, I'm just going to leave that image up throughout the duration of this. So if you're drawing along with me, it'll make it a little easier for you. Now, when I'm drawing Luffy, I always put in the dots for the eyes, and then I immediately draw the upper eyelid, okay? Because there's always this space between the dot of the eye and this upper eyelid. And then I'm gonna fix this nose here because it's bugging me. So I make a selection, and once you have something selected, you can just scoot that up a little bit. Of course, if you're drawing on paper, you're gonna have to erase, but it's a good thing we drew a bunch of guidelines, right? I wanna mention it's probably a good idea to keep all of your sketch lines really, don't press too hard with the pencil. So many times beginners and even intermediate artists will commit too early, too fast. And I mean, I'm working digitally, so I have this advantage of being able to just erase things out, but don't press too hard is what I'm trying to say. And when you're drawing the nose, you want to think of it like a block, like a 3D object. You see how it looks like I could shade that bottom side in and it would look like a three-dimensional, angular nose. And knowing that, it kind of gives us a little bit more of a clear indication of where that lower eyelid would be, right? Because if we can imagine it symmetrically on a face, then it can connect in a sort of a physical way, or we can imagine it connecting. Again, every time you draw a character, you're building a sort of a 3D model in your mind of how their face is constructed, how their parts are connecting using basic physical 3D space in your mind. You're sort of building your ability to imagine it more in 3D. And that allows you to rotate the head any way you want. After drawing this, now that I've drawn Luffy about 8 times, I can draw Luffy at any angle doing any expression. When you're drawing the cheek, now keep in mind that this line over here on the right sort of represents if we were looking the other direction of his cheek. And so we're trying to make it symmetrical. And what that means is it all comes down to a point at the chin, and then we almost want to have a similar shape coming up that right side as what we have on that right side guideline that we drew early on. You'll notice me just sort of feathering and inching the line through before I really commit to it. And I think that's okay when you're sketching, when you're trying to get the likeness. Oh, something else I do here is like, if I want to get that top of the mouth, I put a little dot to just sort of like figure out how close is it to the side of the cheek. And I'll put little marks, and then I'm sort of connecting the dots. And this is a good way to sort of break down if you're doing a study or you're looking at, my drawing and you're trying to emulate that exactly, like kind of pay attention to how close does that line get to the bottom of his chin, for example. And by just putting in a little mark, you can kind of fill in the blanks and then connect the dots a little bit. And that's really the essence of doing a study like this, or doing something where you're trying to capture the likeness of a character, is like the distance between, or the space between the lower eyelid there and his cheek, for example, the space between his eyeballs themselves, the space between his nose and his mouth, all those things. If those are too much space, then it doesn't look like Luffy anymore. And so it's going to be really important to pay attention to all those the spacing between things. And it's quite all right to erase. And in fact, if you're just like all erased out and you're like, I just can't get it to look anything like that, then the best thing to do is just scrap it. Start over. What do you like? 4 minutes in? Start your timer over again. Just start another 15-minute timer. Try to get this down. And in fact, the timer, I'm going to remind you, it's not a race. It's not about, try to get it done within 15 minutes. It's just, you're just trying to give yourself 15 minutes a day of drawing. That's the point. It's just like working on your abs or doing some exercise, doing Tabatas. That's what this is. It's a daily exercise. It's something you can practice every day. And that's why I'm trying to get a lot of these videos so you have something new to practice every day that you can develop your skills with in only 15 minutes. But if you want to do more, you totally can. You can see me going nuts with the eraser there. The lower teeth, you would think that you'd see the inside of the mouth, like what you do in the top teeth, but the bottom row of teeth, you don't see that because we're kind of looking up at him a little bit. And I think that's really important to remember. Unless, of course, if the character's jaw is just way down, if you're doing a sketch where the character's jaw is just totally dropped, you might see the teeth, the row of teeth in the back of his mouth, I want to recommend, if you're drawing on paper, if you got to fill in the black for the mouth, just kind of like go gentle with it, because otherwise you get a whole bunch of graphite built up and then that's going to smudge. The super nice thing about digital is you can zoom in like this and really get in tight, and you can make your brush smaller, and then you can get these little hatch lines that Eiichiro Oda likes to do even for back rows of teeth. You'll see we're going to do that a lot on the straw hat as well to get a little bit of a sense of shading. Do not forget Luffy's scar under his left eye. And for now, you can just do a quick little line there. You don't have to get in and get super detailed. Although sometimes Eiichiro Oda likes to do these little hatch lines like what you see here. And then with the nose, sometimes you'll just do a little nostril. So we got that little triangular shape, and then we just got a little nostril dot. Luffy's ears start very low, like super low, unusually low. The reason for this is because he is meant to look like a monkey. In fact, a lot of the characters in One Piece are sort of mirrored after or have characteristics of animals. Now, when you're drawing these ears, keep in mind the angle of your whole head. So when you're trying to figure out where's the bottom of the right ear, you could draw these kind of guides through the whole thing real quick on another layer, or just sketch them. And you can kind of get a sense of like the symmetry of where the bottom of that ear is. And then just like I showed you before with connecting the dots, you can then figure out the curvature of the rest of that ear, because you figured out where the top is, you figured out where the bottom is, and this whole head is at this kind of an angle that you see right here. Because yes, even cartoon heads are still in a kind of a perspective, and if you want to know the basics of perspective, come on back and do some of my daily workouts for perspective drawing, where I draw gas stations and buildings and things like that. Everything anybody ever drew ever had perspective grid lines underneath and behind it all. Those are the fundamentals that you're basically practicing when you put in those perspective lines. They're fundamentals of construction and perspective. And I'm just gonna kind of like real quick sketch in the neckline. And you know what? Why don't we tackle that hat next? We'll figure out at least where the hat line is. And again, that traces that contour, the curvature. And if you can imagine that round ball that we drew with our guideline is a basketball, and we're just putting a hat on a basketball. That's all that is. Luffy has this really cool, just tufts of solid black hair. And that's just so much fun to draw. It's so much fun to just sketch and doodle in. And I want to encourage you to just draw some cool triangles and like get in there. And now one thing to keep in mind though is that if you make them too fat, then they don't read as hairs. You have to kind of like have them little tufts of it branching off. Then once you got it sketched in, you can just sort of fill in all that black hair real quick. And like now, that is looking, if you take a moment and you take a step back, that is looking like Monkey D. Luffy. Like that is a pretty close approximation of his look. He's starting to really get his likeness already. Now what we want to do is, again, for figuring out like the hat, we want to just sketch in like little spaces, little marks, and then we're going to connect those. See how I'm kind of going all the way out to the far left of how far is that going to reach? And then I connect the dots, I fill it in. And we're coming up on like only having 5 minutes left to do this, and we've already got the likeness of the character in place. Now we're already getting into the details, like getting in that straw hat. This is exciting, right? When you're drawing something like a hat, you want to draw through. So it's okay if you do a real loose or soft line that draws through the back of the head, because the worst thing you can do is like if you've got a character holding a sword and like the end of the handle doesn't go through correctly through his hand, or if the bottom of his hat on the left side doesn't match with where it's coming out of the other side of his hat, it's not going to look right if his hat's all oblong and not looking like it actually fits. And if you're working digitally, you can even make a selection and move it a little bit. You can make adjustments to where the hat sits on top of the head. For example, if you want to raise it a little bit, lower it a little bit, and then take a quick second to just erase out any of your, sketch lines. And then we're going to go up and draw in the top. Now remember, we're just putting a hat on top of a basketball here. So we want to make sure that we're still paying attention to that underlying structure of his head, the basketball that this thing is sitting on top of. And we're just going to like curve out the top part there. We're looking up at it, so we're not going to see much of the top of that hat though. Now you don't have to, but at this point, we're coming up kind of close to the end of this, so you could go in and start to like tidy up some of your lines if you feel like, well, maybe I could like, add a few more tufts of hair here, that adds a little bit more of a balance and a little bit more of a sense of like the full body of his hair, I'm going to sketch in his body here a little bit as well. And you'll notice that he just wears like this kind of vest, and so it's just solid black. They do that on purpose. It's just so fast to draw like a black, vest or suit. Like Sanji just wears a black suit. His whole body is just silhouetted. He's probably so quick to draw. And let me know in the comments if you want to explore some, drawings of other characters from One Piece. Who would you like to learn how to draw with me? I mean, I can do a dissection and break down any one of those characters, and we can learn it together. I'm having a blast doing these. No spoilers, okay? I'm just, how far am I? I just got past the East Blue Saga, so I'm still way at the beginning. But if there are any favorite characters you got from the beginning days of One Piece, let's draw them together. Let's learn them. Who knows, maybe one of you will become Eiichiro Oda's personal assistant. Okay, I don't know. It's possible. Anything's possible if you got that kind of work ethic. One thing I like to do is, if you don't want to draw in all the details of like the straw hat, you could just kind of like imply the straw corners, and this is something that a lot of comic book artists do. So having those little tufts coming off of there makes it look like it's not just like a perfectly metal hat or anything. And you could do this with like wrappings or things like that. And it's a way to just sort of like hint at the texture or material of something without drawing in every grain, every straw piece of the construction of the hat. And then also these little hatch marks that can just be little lines that sort of imply texture or some weaved together straw that's holding the hat together, the construction of it, but mostly just around the shadow sides. You'll notice we get more of that texture as we're looking at parts that are more shaded. And hatch lines are definitely one of those things that's going to take some time to get used to. Like if you're drawing on paper, it's a little easier. But if you get like a tapered, pressure sensitive pen, like I use a Wacom or a XP pen, and if you get this down, you get some nice strong strokes and a nice rhythm to it, you can get some nice texture really fast. And then Eiichiro Oda will also sometimes do these extra hatch lines that kind of cross hatch over the top of that. And now we just want to add extra details and like tighten up some lines and like zoom in. And if you're working on paper, this is the point at which you would just like go in and start to clean up your sketch lines. Little pro tip, if you're working in Photoshop, you can hit the R key on your keyboard to rotate canvas. If you're on an iPad or something like that, you can just rotate the iPad. If you're on paper, you can rotate the paper. What I like to do in these sort of like final stages is just go in and like, you know, turn the canvas and like fix curves. Sometimes your wrist is more confident with some curves more than others. Definitely, you know, like with texturing materials such as like the straw hat in the back of the head like this, I'm gonna go in and like sketch that in. You could also draw a little bit more of the body if you wanted to and just kind of like silhouette in that vest, you know, or start to fill in more of the features, you know, or clean up that little scar under his eye or fix the little bit of hatching. Maybe you want to have some hatching under the neck here. And it's a good place to practice your hatching, right? Don't you feel better? You've completed your 15-minute requirement, and technically speaking, we've got there. This is Luffy, right? I mean, he looks a lot like Luffy. You know, as far as I'm concerned, that's a pretty accurate depiction. You know, I'm not unhappy with it. Now, you've done your workout for the day, you've done your 15-minute study, but if you wanted to really get this character down, you know, I'd suggest maybe picking up a comic and trying to like copy what you see, with what you know now. You know, you can dissect any character from One Piece or any manga that you like, or any comic that you like, or character from a cartoon. And this is a good way to just practice, you know, just do 15 minutes a day. Don't burn out too much. But if you're hardcore and you're like, nah, man, I need to know how to color like Trent. I need to know how to get that look that he's got in the thumbnail. I didn't think anybody'd be all that interested here on YouTube. But if you'd like to learn how to draw like me and be able to do everything that I do, I've made lessons, and I've made easy art lessons. This just happens to be lessons 36 through 40 for the Easy Art Lessons series. It teaches you everything from the ground up about how to draw heads at any angle, how to draw objects in 3D space. And if you start at the absolute beginning, I teach you all these fundamentals that later, as you progress through that series of easy art lessons, you begin to learn how to even color your own artwork in such a fashion as what you're seeing here. It's sort of a linear learning process. You need to learn the basic construction before you can jump right into coloring something like this. If you've done a drawing following today's workout, please share it with me over on X, and I will sometimes give a relist, a repost, or whatever you call it, retweet. Do they say retweet still? I'd like to know. And of course, if you'd like to see me draw something else for one of these upcoming lessons, please do drop that in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next video. All right, ciao.